Writing is used to be known. So at the first level, I think it's pretty obvious what that might mean. It's to be known to other people. So here we're talking about, I suppose, the top layer of conscious thinking, that I have desires that I'm aware of, secrets that I'm aware of, hopes and dreams, thoughts, belief, etc., various attitudes that I hold that are in my mind that I would like other people to know about. Some of these things I might tell my friends. Some of these things I might want to tell my friends but can't tell them with normal speaking. So sometimes we do things like write people letters. Dear James, I'm very sorry I made you sentient. You were only supposed to be a vase, but I got lonely in my mystical clay fortress and wanted a bit of company. Whoopsie. Yours faithfully, Albert. Perhaps in high moments of emotion. So a breakup, for example, I've received letters after breakups. I've written letters after breakups. Maybe a funeral, we write a letter as a proxy for being known to the person who's deceased, things like that. So we might want to be known to other people who already know us at some level, but they don't know everything about us, and there are certain things we want to become known. And writing's one way to do that. But I think there's a more interesting sense in which we do that. And this applies to someone who maybe writes to publication. Certainly, I'm writing partly to be known. Mostly what I want other people to know about is what I think. I need at some basic level for people to know my beliefs and my justifications for my beliefs. I don't know why I need people to know this, but I feel kind of invisible when I'm not doing this. I don't like it. That's not good for my mental state at all. My mental health, if you want to use that word. I think a lot of people feel this way. A lot of people write poetry because they desperately need the world to see the parts of them which are normally invisible. Same with literature and other forms of creative writing. And again, this could mean something very different for different people. So I need my beliefs to be known by other people for some reason. And writing is a way I can do that beyond just my very immediate circle, most of whom don't really give a shit what I believe, frankly, because they're just my friends. Some do, some don't. So I need people to hear me, so I start an Instagram and write there with Patterson's Story, because it might look like a teaching or educational Instagram, but it really isn't. It's really somewhere I get to say what it is I think about things. That's why I do it. Other people might be doing it for different reasons. They might need people to know how they feel. I don't care quite as much about that, but clearly many people do exactly that. Certainly there are many poets who write more from a state of feeling. I'm not saying I don't write from a point of feeling, but it's not necessarily my intention. Other people really want what they feel to be something somebody else feels. They might do this through poetry, publishing their poetry in more traditional means, or maybe publishing poetry like I do on Instagram, and the same goes for literature. And you can see this. In some sense, you can see what it is the author of the text wants us to know about them from the temperature of the text. If I'm writing as Immanuel Kant does, for those of you who haven't read him, he's very difficult to read, but a very important philosopher in the Western tradition. Seems to me he really needed people to know what he thought. But perhaps if you take someone else, let's say Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka has beliefs, of course, that we all do. It's not so clear what his beliefs are. from his reading his texts. Very difficult to unpack his beliefs, but there's a very clear kind of malaise of melancholy and estrangement and fear in his texts. Strikes me as being the case he had to get that sense that's inside him to other people. So, yeah, you can want to be known to people around you, but more importantly, writers often want to or need to be known by the world, more broadly speaking. Okay, so you might want to be known to other people, but beyond that, you might want to be known at a more fundamental level to yourself. This is something that you do in journaling, for example, or maybe certain sorts of free association writing, and arguably even in things like writing fiction. I feel like some of what I'm doing when I'm writing fiction is uncovering unconscious parts of myself, especially when you get into that kind of trance-like state you sometimes get into when you're doing creative writing, where you forget yourself, where you dissolve to some extent. As for journaling, that's a strategy, a very specific strategy for doing almost exactly that. Depends on how you're journaling. But one way to do the journaling is to write without thinking very much, to write without lifting the pen, to write for 15 minutes without thinking about what you're writing or without stopping writing at any point. Part of why you do this is a kind of psychoanalytic approach where you're trying to dredge up stuff that is not in your normal field of conscious awareness, so that after the fact, after you finish writing, you can peel through it and look for signs of things that are kind of hidden below the surface of your attention that might be causing whatever it is you're journaling for. Maybe you're depressed, maybe you're anxious, maybe you're just going through a difficult time. I mean, I guess you could do it when you're happy too. There's no reason it couldn't be done then. But if you want to explore your psyche at an unconscious level, writing is a way you can do that, because you can do the kind of free associative thinking that we can do in our minds, but you can freeze it on the page, and then you can use it to kind of discover yourself. And again, it doesn't just have to be journals. It can be just the normal act of writing literature or stories or poetry as well. I think it happens there fairly automatically, in fact. Certainly some texts have more abstraction in them, whereby the unconscious looks a little bit more apparent. You could certainly argue that something like Alice in Wonderland, it has a little bit more content from the unconscious in it than a bit of kind of literary fiction set in Melbourne over a period of 3 days about two people's relationship breaking up. That may be less unconsciously oriented. Then again, it may not. I don't want to wrap myself in knots, tie myself in knots. Sorry, I don't. Now I'm messing up common expressions. Oh my God, I'm losing my mind. All right, so there's one more thing in the to be known category of why it is we write. We've done, it's a way of being known by the world. It's a way of being known by yourself. And I guess this is a form of being known by the world, and it's my favorite one of these to talk about. It's to be known by future persons. So one of my favorite concepts in ancient Greek literature, particularly comes out of the Iliad. It's the notion of kleos aptheton. What this means is fame everlasting, or something like that. Fame forever. Now, Achilles, in the early part of the Trojan myth, has a choice. He is told that he will die young if he goes to fight the Trojans on the side of the Achaeans, the Greeks. So he has a choice. He can do that, or he can stay behind and have he can have a long, and happy life where he has children and he kind of dies happy. He's given a choice. He knows whichever he chooses will actually come true. He chooses to go off to war and to die young. And the reason he chooses that is to have fame everlasting, for his name to retain its place in the consciousness of other beings for as long as possible. Now, I know a bit about ancient Greek literature. I know far less about other traditions. One assumes that it's not the only place this arises, because it's quite clear to me that many human beings really need to feel like they don't die when they die. Some of this might do it by having children and leaving a legacy that way. But even that runs out pretty quick. 2 generations in, your name is more or less dead. Now, people might do their family trees and your name will come up, but they don't really know you. That's just a name. It could be any person attached to that name. They don't know the person. But if you're Achilles, your name is still retained today. And we don't know the original Achilles, although he's fictional, but let's imagine he wasn't. We don't know him exactly, but we know his exploits. We know the kinds of things he thought. We have some sense of his character, of who he was, essentially. Likewise, for someone like Shakespeare. Shakespeare will probably be known to every English speaker who ever exists into the future until we become, inhuman cyborgs, or until we become extinct. And I think some motivation for that is, for doing that kind of work, is the desire to live on, to have a famous name. And I've admitted this myself in the Instagram account. It's kind of a shameful thing to admit for some reason. I don't think it should be, but I do want my name to be famous. I don't want to be personally famous. I don't want to get stopped on the street. But that would be a special kind of hell, actually, for people to just come up to you at random and demand your time and attention. I think that's a curse. But it would be great if the name that's attached to my fiction is known to future generations, and that people speak about me, at least to some extent, as if I'm still a real living and breathing entity. Now, there's a bit of a fallacy here, because I'm going to be dead. I'm not going to have any conscious awareness. Maybe there are people out there watching this who believe that consciousness transmits after death. I'm not judging you if you believe that, but I don't believe that. I think whatever James is in the current form, this particular kind of consciously aware state, that at least will definitely end as far as I'm concerned. So I won't be aware of my potential fame in the future. And yet James now wants desperately to be known by future generations. It might be an irrational thing to want, but I want it. I don't think I'm the only one, and I think if we had less shame attached to the idea that we'd want to kind of live on in that way, I think probably more people would admit that is the case. And maybe people will admit that. So if there's anyone watching this who feels the same way, then chuck it in the comments. I expect probably no comments, but it'd be awesome if someone commented. Then you could be famous. You could have fame everlasting. Kleos Aptaton right here in the Patterson Story comments on the first Patterson Story video ever created. You could be comment number 1. I'll see you there. If you're still watching this video, thank you so much for paying attention, or at least having the video on in the background. If you liked what I'm doing here, remember to subscribe, hit the like button, comment and interact if you can. And if you're interested in seeing more of my work, you can check out my Instagram. That's patterson.story. I've got lots of work already up there. And yeah, I had fun doing this. I hope to see you next time. And until then, peace out.